Hey guys, Will here. Now you probably already figured out from the video title, this isn't the kind of video that you would normally expect to find here on Boosted Media, but I saw something this morning that really got me quite angry, and I thought that it was worth talking about because I think it's something that all of us in the sim racing community need to be aware of and all need to take a little bit of responsibility to try to ensure that this kind of thing doesn't happen into the future. Yeah, I woke up this morning and switched on YouTube as I often do when I'm having my breakfast, just to see what was going on in the world. And I came across a video in my news feed by a fellow sim racing content creator called Basic Ollie. Now, I am familiar with him. I don't regularly watch his content, but this particular video title really kind of sparked my interest. The video was titled "Professional Drivers Intentionally Ruin a Special Event on iRacing." And I thought, well, I haven't heard anything about this. So I clicked on the video to see what had happened, and was absolutely shocked at what I saw, to be honest with you guys. And I think that this kind of relates to a much bigger issue that we're facing with sim racing in general at the moment. But I wanted to sort of try and achieve a couple of things with today's video. I wanted to firstly hold the people that have done this accountable on on as large a stage as possible. We do have quite a big following here at Boosted Media these days, and like I said, I don't normally get involved in these kinds of dramas. Ollie's done an absolutely amazing job at his video, and I would definitely encourage you guys to watch his video. I'll link it down in the description below for you. But yeah, I think that this needs to be called out. It needs to be called out by as many content creators as possible to take a stand against this kind of behavior and make sure that there is real world ramifications and consequences for what's happened. So essentially, a team of real life racing drivers, professional race drivers, none of which I'd ever heard of before, admittedly, entered into the Spa 24-hour race over the weekend. And for whatever reason, and I'm not going to pretend like I understand why, but they took it upon themselves to basically do everything that they could to ruin everybody else's experience. Now, the Spa 24-hour race, if you're not aware, is something that a lot of people take very seriously, and fairly so. People spend many hours practicing for these races. They take time away from their families, their kids, their jobs, even in some examples. People take time off work to compete in this race. It's a big deal in the online racing scene, particularly amongst those of us who are iRacers. But so this team of professional drivers entered and basically did things like deliberately ramming other cars off the circuit, waiting for specific cars to catch up with them and then wiping them out, holding up the entire pack so that everybody was bunched up behind them, just weaving and darting all over the place. And I'll put a little bit of footage up on the screen for you, but again, I would definitely recommend go and watch Ollie's video to get the full picture of exactly what happened. But it was obvious that, everybody's race was pretty much ruined by it because people were scared to overtake this car in case they got bombed or, it was just an absolute mess. And it was the most blatant example I've ever seen of just an entire team of people going in and just deliberately ruining other people's races. And, I can't understand why on earth they would have done it. And I really do think that iRacing need to permaban all of the people involved because they absolutely should not be on the platform. And I think that iRacing actually need to come out and make some sort of a statement to, I guess, put those of us who are investing heavily in their platforms' minds at ease, because none of us want to have an experience like that. And of course, there is only so much that they can do, but I don't want to make excuses either, that kind of thing. There should be some sort of way that, if everybody's reporting a driver for the same thing, they should get kicked off. I don't know. I'm not going to even go into the weeds on that stuff at the moment, but I do think that iRacing need to make some sort of a statement reassuring the people that spend a lot of money on their platform that they're doing everything they can to avoid this kind of thing. Obviously, it's not their fault, but that's not to say that they're doing everything they possibly could to avoid these kinds of things. But in saying that, we also need to take personal responsibility for our actions online as well. But, the first point is, I think they should be banned from iRacing permanently. That's my opinion. I also think that there needs to be some sort of real world repercussion or consequence for what they've done. As I said, they are professional racing drivers. They have sponsors. If I can tell you that, if I was one of their sponsors, I would be absolutely livid at what's taken place because it's frankly embarrassing. If I had my logo on those cars and that kind of thing was going on, I'd be so embarrassed by it because at the end of the day, they're being paid to represent that brand. And, I think that even though this was a separate event from that, their conduct 24/7, when you're a paid professional, your responsibility is to carry yourself in the best of light, all the time. And I feel that with my own brand, Boosted Media. Like I always conduct myself to the best of my ability, at least in the best way possible, because you never know who's watching. And it does reflect not only your own brand, but the brands that choose to work with you and invest in you as well. So that's all I'm going to say on that. I do hope that there's some sort of real world, some ramification, some sort of real world consequence for it. But I think really what we need to talk about here is the bigger issue that faces sim racing that this kind of, I guess, highlights. So I've always said, and I actually did a video very similar to this about 4 years ago now, talking about some of the problems that I see in sim racing. And when I made that video, it was around the sort of the tail end of the pandemic, when we were sort of seeing a big boom in the amount of attention that sim racing was getting in general, and some of the issues that it created. And I've always thought that sim racing has three fundamental challenges, maybe not problems, but challenges. The lack of sustained G-force is one of them. So obviously you just can't simulate the kinds of forces, particularly sustained cornering forces, that you feel when you're driving around a track in real life in your living room. It's just not possible. Another one being the lack of consequence, or the lack of danger or perceived danger. Obviously you're going to be compelled to do things in a virtual car that you would never ever do in real life because of the physical and financial consequences of doing so. And then lastly, and I think this is probably the biggest thing that affects sim racing, but probably the least spoken about for whatever reason, it's the fact that not everybody is going to be there for the same reasons in sim racing. In real life motorsport, for the most part at least, everybody's there trying to do the best they possibly can. They're all financially invested, at least to some extent. They're all, carrying sponsors who have expectations on them. They're all there to win. They're not there to muck around. And, it's as simple as that in most cases, at least. Online racing is completely different from that outside of league racing. You've got people that are, getting on the cans and just wanting to jump in and drive of an evening. You've got people on the flip side to that who are spending many, many, many hours practicing before a race. And, they might only have one opportunity to race that week. They might have spent 10 hours practicing, and then they get wiped out by, somebody that was just on the cans and wanting to have a little bit of fun and not really caring, too much about the outcome. And the last thing that I want to do is suggest that people that are taking it more casually aren't welcome. The last thing we want to be doing is, gatekeeping or encouraging any sort of elitism or anything like that. But at the same time, I do feel that every single person in the sim racing community has a responsibility to conduct themselves in the best way possible, to present sim racing in the best light possible at all times. If you're genuinely passionate about sim racing, you want to make sure that other people are having a good experience with it as well, because you don't know who's in that lobby with you. You don't know whether, somebody might be jumping into an online race for the first time. And, if they have a bad experience, they might never come back. I get emails from people all the time that, have spent many, many, many hours practicing and, racing against AI and so forth. And oftentimes they're actually really nervous about jumping into an online lobby for the first time because they don't know whether they're going to stack up. They might be embarrassed about their performance, or, they just don't really know what to expect. So it's our responsibility as a community to make sure that they feel welcome and that they have the best experience possible. And, since the pandemic situation, when we saw that massive influx of new sim racers, I think that community sense has been lost a little bit. And, it's great that sim racing is growing and we're getting more and more people involved. But, sometimes things can grow a little bit too quickly, and, we lose that sense of community that we maybe really enjoyed and were really passionate about beforehand. So if you are one of those people that is really passionate about sim racing, I would definitely encourage you to, think twice about the way you conduct yourself online. And not everybody is going to go and do crazy things like what we're talking about in this particular example. But we do all have a responsibility to make sure that we're presenting our hobby in the best possible light. So, the next time you're in a lobby and you're feeling a little bit cranky, or you're, just feeling like you want to punt that guy off that just gave you a tap in the corner, whatever it might be, just think twice about how that would be perceived by other people and whether it's really necessary. And I think as a community, if we can all sort of take a little bit of a moment to think about the other people that might be in the lobby with us and try to, maximize their experience as much as we're trying to enjoy the experience ourselves, I think sim racing would be a lot better overall. So I'm going to leave it at that, guys. I'm not going to make this a super long rant or a really long video or anything like that, but I'd like to hear from you guys in the comments down below. What's been your experience of late? I actually did a race video a couple of days ago against AI, and I mentioned in that video that I'd been trying to record an online race all day, and if I didn't get wiped out in turn one, I'd end up out on the track somewhere on my own, and it just wasn't making for interesting viewing. And the AI race actually ended up being really fun and interesting. but I was actually surprised by the number of people that chimed in the comments on that video and mentioned that they'd been spending more time racing against AI lately, and that they'd sort of rediscovered their love for sim racing a little bit through that experience. And, you know, that's kind of sad, I think, because online racing has an element to it that you just don't get racing offline. It has a, you know, that excitement, that, you know, that thrill of racing other people. I guess the unpredictability of it all as well is, you know, on another level. And, you know, I don't want to see people turning away from that. I want to see people enjoying their online racing as much as possible. And yeah, I think we all have a responsibility as a community to make sure that not only our own experience, but other people's experience is as good as it could possibly be, because the first impression might be the only impression. And it's as simple as that, guys. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you were involved in that split of that race with those guys that were intentionally ruining other people's races, I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below as well. What was your experience with it? And yeah, let's try to do our best as a community to ensure that this kind of behavior doesn't stand. You know, we need to stand against this kind of thing. And yeah, let's continue to strive to make sim racing as good as it can possibly be. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye.